In a quiet neighborhood, there lived a woman named Sarah who had grown tired of her own reflection. Every morning she would wake up with big dreams and grand plans, but by evening she felt the same crushing disappointment. She wanted to write a book, learn a new language, get in shape, and build stronger relationships. But despite her best intentions, nothing ever seemed to stick. Sarah was not lazy. She was not lacking in intelligence or ambition, but she had fallen into the trap that catches so many of us. She believed that transformation required massive action, dramatic changes, and complete life overhauls. She would set huge goals, work intensely for a few days, then burn out and return to her old patterns. One autumn morning, Sarah met her elderly neighbour, Mrs. Chen, while checking the mail. Mrs. Chen was known throughout the neighbourhood for her beautiful garden, her fluent Spanish despite being originally from Taiwan, and her remarkable energy at 78 years old. People often wondered how she managed to accomplish so much while always seeming so peaceful and content. Sarah found herself pouring out her frustrations to Mrs. Chen. She talked about her failed attempts at change, her cycle of motivation and disappointment, and her growing belief that some people were just naturally disciplined while others were not. Mrs. Chen listened carefully, nodding with understanding. When Sarah finished speaking, Mrs. Chen smiled gently and said something that would change everything. She said, "My dear, you are trying to move a mountain with your bare hands. But mountains are not moved in one day. They are shaped by tiny drops of water, falling consistently, year after year." Mrs. Chen invited Sarah to her garden and pointed to a magnificent oak tree. She explained that this tree had grown from a small acorn she planted 20 years ago. Every single day, without exception, she had given it just 1 cup of water. Nothing some more. Days she felt nothing less. Like giving more, other days she barely wanted to go outside, but she always gave that 1 cup. Sarah looked confused. She asked, "But Mrs. Chen, 1 cup of water seems so insignificant. How could something so small create something so impressive?" And Mrs. Chen chuckled and said, "That is exactly the point." You see, most people think big results require big actions. But the truth is, big results come from small actions performed consistently over time. Mrs. Chen then shared her secret. She called it the power of tiny habits. Instead of trying to change everything at once, she focused on the smallest possible improvement she could make each day. When she wanted to learn Spanish, she didn't sign up for intensive classes or try to study for hours. She simply learned 1 new word every morning with her coffee. When she wanted to get stronger, she didn't join a gym or commit to hour-long workouts. She did 5 push-ups every day right after brushing her teeth. When she wanted to read more, she didn't set a goal of reading 50 books a year. She read just 2 pages every night before bed. Sarah was skeptical. She said, "But Mrs. Chen, that seems too easy. How can such tiny actions lead to real change?" Mrs. Chen smiled and explained that this was the magic most people never understand. Small actions feel easy, so we actually do them. And when we do them consistently, they compound like interest in a savings account. She told Sarah about the mathematics of improvement. If you get just 1% better each day, after 1 year, you will be 37 times better than when you started. But if you try to improve by 50% and only manage it for a few days before giving up, you end up worse than when you began. Mrs. Chen then revealed something even more important. She explained that tiny habits work because they change your identity, not just your behavior. Every time she did her 5 push-ups, she was proving to herself that she was the type of person who exercises. Every time she learned 1 Spanish word, she was reinforcing that she was someone who studies languages. She said, "Sarah, when you try to make big changes, you fight against your current identity. Your mind resists because the change feels foreign and overwhelming. But when you make tiny changes, your mind accepts them easily. Over time, these small actions reshape how you see yourself." Sarah began to understand. Mrs. Chen continued, "The secret is not to focus on the results you want, Focus on the person you want to become. Then ask yourself, what would that person do today? Not this month, not this year, but today. And make it so small that you cannot say no. Mrs. Chen suggested that Sarah pick just one tiny habit to start with, something so small that it would feel almost silly not to do it. Sarah thought carefully and decided she wanted to become someone who writes. Instead of committing to write a chapter every day, she committed to writing just one sentence each morning. The next morning, Sarah woke up and wrote one sentence in a notebook she kept by her bed. It felt ridiculously easy. The sentence wasn't even good, but she had kept her commitment. The following morning, she wrote another sentence, then another. After a week, something interesting happened. Writing one sentence had become so automatic that Sarah often found herself writing 2 or 3 sentences without even thinking about it. But she never pressured herself to do more than one. The key was maintaining the habit, not maximizing the result. Mrs. Chen had warned her about this phenomenon. She explained that once your brain accepts a new behavior as part of your identity, it naturally wants to do more. But the moment you make the habit harder or bigger, you risk breaking the cycle. The power comes from consistency, not intensity. As weeks passed, Sarah noticed something remarkable happening. She was becoming someone who writes every day. This identity shift began affecting other areas of her life. She started making other tiny improvements. She began drinking 1 extra glass of water each day. She started doing 10 jumping jacks every morning. She committed to reading just 1 page before checking her phone. None of these actions felt difficult or overwhelming, but together they were transforming her life in ways she never expected. Sarah was discovering the profound truth that Mrs. Chen had learned decades earlier. Real change doesn't happen through dramatic moments of willpower. It happens through the quiet accumulation of small, consistent actions that eventually reshape who we are. 3 months into her new journey, Sarah experienced what Mrs. Chen had predicted would happen. The tiny habits had become so natural that she barely thought about them anymore. Writing 1 sentence felt as automatic as brushing her teeth. But more importantly, Sarah was beginning to see herself differently. She was no longer someone who wanted to write, she was someone who writes. She was no longer someone who hoped to be healthy. She was someone who takes care of her body every single day. This shift in identity created a powerful momentum that surprised her. One evening, Sarah realized she had written over 100 pages without ever setting out to write a book. Her daily sentences had grown into paragraphs, then into full pages, but always organically. She never forced herself to write more than 1 sentence, yet her natural enthusiasm kept pulling her forward. Mrs. Chen had explained this would happen. She called it the snowball effect. Once you prove to yourself that you are the type of person who keeps commitments, your brain starts looking for more opportunities to reinforce this identity. Success breeds success, but only when it starts small enough to guarantee early wins. Sarah also noticed changes she hadn't expected. Her confidence was growing in areas completely unrelated to her tiny habits. At work, she started speaking up more in meetings. In relationships, she found herself setting healthier boundaries. The discipline she was building in small areas was overflowing into every aspect of her life. Mrs. Chen had warned her about this too. She explained that discipline is like a muscle. When you strengthen it in one area, the entire muscle gets stronger. Every time Sarah kept her tiny commitments, she was building trust with herself. This self-trust became the foundation for bigger changes down the road. But Sarah's journey wasn't without challenges. There were days when she felt unmotivated, days when 1 sentence felt like climbing a mountain. On these difficult days, Mrs. Chen's wisdom proved invaluable. She had taught Sarah the 2-minute rule. If something takes less than 2 minutes, you do it no matter how you feel. Writing 1 sentence took less than 30 seconds. Even on her worst days, Sarah could manage 30 seconds. This taught her a crucial lesson about motivation. She had always believed that motivation led to action, but she discovered the opposite was true. Action leads to motivation. Starting was always the hardest part. Mrs. Chen also taught Sarah about the importance of environment design. Instead of relying on willpower, she made her desired behaviors easier and her unwanted behaviors harder. Sarah moved her notebook to her nightstand where she couldn't miss it. She put her workout clothes next to her bed. She placed a water bottle on her desk at work. These environmental changes seemed small, but they eliminated the friction that often derailed good intentions. Sarah learned that people with great habits aren't necessarily more disciplined. They simply structure their environment to make good choices easier and bad choices harder. As Sarah's confidence grew, she began sharing her experience with friends and co-workers. Many were skeptical. They couldn't believe that such small actions could lead to meaningful change. Some even laughed at the idea of writing just one sentence per day. But Sarah had learned not to let others' doubts shake her commitment. Mrs. Chen had prepared her for this reaction. She explained that most people are addicted to the idea of dramatic transformation because it feels more exciting. But excitement fades while systems endure. Sarah was building a system that could weeks, 6 to last a lifetime, not just a few motivate months after starting her first tiny habit. Sarah looked back at her old self with compassion and understanding. She realized that her previous failures weren't character flaws. She had simply been using the wrong approach. She had been trying to change her life through force instead of designing it through systems. The woman who once felt stuck and frustrated was now someone others came to for advice. Sarah had learned that the path to extraordinary results isn't paved with extraordinary actions. It's built from ordinary actions performed with extraordinary consistency. She understood now why Mrs. Chen's garden was so beautiful, why her Spanish was so fluent, why her energy was so remarkable. These weren't gifts or talents, they were the natural result of tiny, consistent actions compounded over decades. Sarah had discovered what researchers call the compound effect of small improvements. Just as money grows, improvements create exponential results over time. The key is patience and faith in the process, even when progress feels invisible. Mrs. Chen had taught her to trust the process during what she called the Valley of Disappointment. This is the period where you're working consistently but don't see dramatic results yet. Most people quit during this valley, never realizing they were just weeks away from breakthrough. But Sarah had learned to measure progress differently. Instead of focusing on outcomes, she tracked her consistency. She celebrated the fact that she was becoming someone who keeps commitments to herself. This internal scorecard kept her motivated when external results weren't yet visible. Now Sarah understood the profound wisdom in Mrs. Chen's words about moving mountains. Real transformation doesn't happen through heroic efforts or dramatic moments. It happens through the quiet power of showing up day after day with small actions that honor the person you're becoming. The neighborhood had begun to notice changes in Sarah. She walked with more confidence, smiled more often, and radiated a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. People started asking what had changed, and Sarah would smile, thinking of the simple truth Mrs. Chen had shared. Today, Sarah sits in her garden, pen in hand, writing her daily sentence just as she has for over a year now. The notebook that once held a single uncertain line now contains the draft of her first completed novel. But more importantly, Sarah has become the person she always dreamed of being. Her transformation didn't happen overnight. It happened one sentence at a time, one push-up at a time, one page at a time. She learned that the secret to lasting change isn't found in moments of inspiration or bursts of motivation. It's found in the quiet decision to show up consistently, even when you don't feel like it. Mrs. Chen was right. Mountains aren't moved by force, but by the gentle persistence of water, drop by drop, day after day. Sarah discovered that she didn't need to become a different person to achieve her dreams. She simply needed to become someone who takes tiny steps toward those dreams every single day. If you're feeling stuck like Sarah once was, remember this: you don't need a complete life overhaul. You just need to start with something so small you can't say no. Pick one tiny habit, make it ridiculously easy, then show up tomorrow and do it again. Your future self is waiting on the other side of your consistency. The path to extraordinary results begins with one ordinary step. What will your first tiny step be?